People always think betrayal begins with a lie. It doesn't. Sometimes it begins with a smile, a kiss on your forehead, a warm cup of coffee, and 6 words you'll never question. Just sign these routine papers. 5 years ago, that's exactly what my husband said to me. I signed every page without reading a single word. Not because I was careless, because I trusted him. 5 years later, one unexpected phone call changed everything I believed about my marriage. The woman on the other end said something that still echoes in my head. Mrs. Carter, according to county records, you don't legally own your home. I laughed. I actually laughed, because I thought she'd called the wrong person. She hadn't. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 41 years old. I've been an elementary school teacher for nearly 17 years. Children have always been easier for me to understand than adults. Kids tell you exactly how they feel. Adults hide behind smiles. My husband, Daniel, was the exception. Or at least, that's what I believed. We'd been married for 18 years. Together, we'd raised an incredible daughter, Emma. We built our first home together. We survived layoffs, hospital bills, my mother's cancer, his father's funeral, every difficult chapter, together. Or so I thought. People who met Daniel always described him the same way: successful, patient, reliable. He never lost his temper, never shouted, never embarrassed me. He remembered birthdays, opened doors, sent flowers to my classroom every anniversary. My coworkers constantly told me how lucky I was. Sometimes, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. Daniel owned a small real estate company. Nothing flashy. Just enough to renovate older homes and resell them. He wasn't rich, but he was ambitious. Every dollar we earned went somewhere. Some into savings, some into Emma's college fund, some back into his business. I never questioned where the money went, because every month he showed me spreadsheets, profit reports, tax documents. Everything looked organized, professional, transparent. There was never a reason to doubt him. Looking back now, I realize trust doesn't disappear overnight. It fades so slowly. You don't notice it's leaving, like daylight at the end of summer. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. Emma was 12. She sat at the dining table doing math homework. Daniel walked into the kitchen carrying a thick blue folder. He smiled. "Hey, when you get a minute, I need your signature on a few refinance documents." I looked up from grading papers. "Refinance?" He nodded casually. "Our accountant suggested restructuring a few business loans. It'll lower our interest rate." I shrugged. "Okay." He opened the folder. There had to be 20 pages. Little yellow sticky notes marked every place I needed to sign. He laughed. "I know. It's a ridiculous amount. Lawyers love paperwork." I rolled my eyes. "They really do." Emma looked up from her homework. "Mom, you're signing without reading?" Daniel answered before I could. "They're standard forms. Nothing exciting." Emma grinned. "My teacher says never sign anything without reading it." Daniel chuckled. "Your teacher has obviously never refinanced a mortgage." We all laughed. I picked up the pen and signed, page after page, without reading a single paragraph, because why would I? This was my husband, the man I'd trusted with every dream we'd ever built. After I finished, Daniel quietly gathered the papers. He looked relieved. Not happy. Relieved. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Today, that expression haunts me. Life moved on. Emma started high school. Daniel's business expanded. We remodeled the kitchen, adopted a golden retriever named Murphy, celebrated 18 years of marriage. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt wrong. If someone had asked me then whether I trusted my husband with my life, I would have answered without hesitation. Yes, absolutely, without question. 5 years later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I was arranging colorful paper butterflies on my classroom wall when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Normally, I let unknown calls go to voicemail. Something told me to answer. "Hello? Good morning. May I speak with Naomi Carter?" "This is Naomi. My name is Olivia Brooks. I'm an estate attorney here in Raleigh. I apologize for calling unexpectedly, but I believe there's been a mistake involving your property records." I smiled politely. "I'm sorry. I think you've got the wrong person." She paused, then quietly asked, "Mrs. Carter, have you looked at the deed to your home recently?" My smile disappeared. "No. Why?" There was another pause, longer this time. Then she spoke words that changed my life forever. "Because according to the county, you haven't been listed as an owner. For almost 5 years, I stared at the colorful paper butterflies on my classroom wall. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Mrs. Brooks' words echoed through my mind. You haven't been listed as an owner for almost 5 years. That wasn't possible. There had to be a mistake. I think you've got the wrong Naomi Carter. I wish I did, she replied gently. I've verified your address twice. The property at 1842 Willow Creek Drive. That's your home, isn't it? I swallowed. Yes. And your husband is Daniel Carter? Yes. There was another pause. I'm afraid the records are correct. The school bell rang. Children poured into the hallway laughing. Backpacks bounced against tiny shoulders. Teachers greeted students with bright smiles. Normally, that sound made me happy. Today, it felt strangely distant, as if I were watching someone else's life. Mrs. Brooks continued. I know this call is unexpected. I'm not asking you to make any decisions today, but I think you should come by my office. I believe there are documents you need to see. I hesitated. Why are you calling me? Our firm is handling a commercial refinancing case. Your husband's company is one of the businesses involved. During our title review, your name appeared in older records, but disappeared from the current deed. Something about the way she said it made me uneasy. She wasn't accusing Daniel. She wasn't suggesting fraud. She simply sounded concerned. I finish work at 3:30. I'll be there. When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking. I slipped the phone into my desk drawer, just as my students walked into the classroom. Good morning, Mrs. Carter! 22 smiling faces looked up at me. I forced a smile. Good morning, everyone. For the next 6 hours, I taught fractions, read stories, answered questions, smiled for class photos, but my mind never left one sentence. You haven't been listed as an owner. At exactly 3:45, I parked outside Brooks and Holloway Legal Group. The building was quiet, modern, simple. Nothing about it suggested my life was about to change. A receptionist welcomed me. Mrs. Carter? Miss Brooks is expecting you. She led me into a conference room. A few moments later, Olivia Brooks walked in carrying a thick file. She looked to be in her late 40s. Professional. Calm. The kind of attorney who chose every word carefully. She sat across from me. I know this is uncomfortable, so I'll get straight to the point. She opened the folder. Inside were copies of county property records. She slid the first page toward me. This is your home's original deed, I smiled. There. My name. And Daniel's. She nodded. Correct. Then she placed another document beside it. This is the current deed. I looked down. Daniel Carter. Only Daniel Carter. My name was gone. There has to be another page. There isn't. This isn't possible. It was legally recorded. When? She quietly pointed to a date. 5 years earlier. The exact same week. Daniel had asked me to sign those routine papers. My chest tightened. No. This has to be a coincidence. Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she pulled another document from the file. This is the instrument that changed ownership. At the top of the page, I read 2 words I'd never noticed before. Quits Alayam deed. I frowned. I've never seen this before. You signed it. I would have remembered. She slowly rotated the document toward me. At the bottom was my signature. Every curve. Every letter. Perfect. It was mine. I felt the room begin to spin. I don't understand. I never agreed to this. Olivia's expression softened. I'm not saying you intended to, but legally, the signature is valid. I stared at the page, trying to remember. Blue folder, yellow sticky notes, Daniel smiling. Emma warning me. Mom, you're signing without reading? A memory I'd laughed at suddenly didn't seem funny anymore. I need a copy of everything. Of course. She handed me the folder, then paused. There is something else. I looked up. This wasn't the only document filed that month. What do you mean? She hesitated. There were several. Mortgage restructuring, business guarantees, ownership transfers. It appears multiple financial arrangements were completed within a few days. I frowned. I never signed anything else. She didn't respond. She simply reached into the folder again and placed another document in front of me. Another signature. Mine. Another. Mine. Another. Mine. There were 8 documents, every single one signed by me. Every single one from the same afternoon. I left the office just before sunset. The folder rested on the passenger seat beside me. I couldn't bring myself to open it again. Instead, I drove home in complete silence. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel's truck was already there. Through the kitchen window, I could see him laughing with Emma while they cooked dinner together. They looked perfect, normal, happy. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should simply walk inside, say nothing, and pretend I'd never answered that phone call. Then I looked at the folder again and realized the woman who walked into that house tonight was no longer the same woman who'd left it that morning. I left the folder inside my car. For nearly 2 minutes, I just sat there, watching the lights inside our kitchen. Daniel was setting the table. Emma was laughing about something. Murphy, our golden retriever, kept begging for pieces of chicken. It looked like every other Tuesday, the kind of evening I'd prayed for during the difficult years. Peaceful, ordinary, safe. But nothing felt safe anymore. The front door opened before I reached it. "There you are." Daniel smiled. "I was about to call." He leaned forward and kissed my cheek. "You look exhausted. Long day?" I forced a smile. "The kids were a little wild today." He laughed. "Sounds about right." His eyes searched my face for a second, almost as if he sensed something was different. Then he stepped aside. "Dinner's ready." The whole evening, I watched him. Not obviously, quietly. The way people watch strangers in airports, trying to figure out who they really are. He laughed at Emma's jokes, asked about her chemistry test, fed Murphy scraps under the table when he thought I wasn't looking. Nothing seemed rehearsed. Nothing seemed fake. If this man had spent 5 years lying to me, he deserved an Oscar. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I quietly slipped out of bed. The folder was still inside my car. I carried it into the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and began reading every page. Slowly. This time, I wasn't signing. I was paying attention. The first document was the quitclaim deed. Simple. Clear. I had voluntarily transferred every ownership interest in our home to Daniel. No compensation. No conditions. Just signed it away. The second document was even stranger. A personal guarantee. My signature appeared again. The legal language was confusing, but one sentence caught my attention. The undersigned acknowledges full understanding of the agreement. I whispered to myself. I never understood any of this. I kept reading until nearly 1 a.m. The deeper I went, the worse it became. Every document had been notarized. Every signature witnessed. Everything was perfectly legal. There wasn't a single forged signature. Not one. Only mine. Over and over again. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in almost 3 years. Instead of driving to school, I drove downtown, straight to the county records office. If Olivia Brooks was right, there had to be a public record of everything. An elderly clerk greeted me warmly. "Can I help you?" "I'd like copies of every property filing connected to my address." He nodded. "No problem." A few minutes later, he returned with a stack of papers. I flipped through them, one after another. Every transfer, every refinance, every modification. Then, one document stopped me. It wasn't about our house. It was about Daniel's company, Carter Horizon Development LLC. I frowned. That wasn't the company I remembered. For years, Daniel had owned a business called Carter Family Properties. When had the name changed? Why hadn't he told me? The clerk noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" I looked up. "This company, when was it created?" He checked the filing. "About 4 years ago." "What happened to the old one?" He shrugged. "Looks like it was dissolved." "Dissolved?" I stared at the paper. Daniel never mentioned closing his business. He celebrated landing bigger contracts, hiring new employees, expanding. So why would he quietly dissolve the company we'd built together? Back in my car, I opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I logged into our shared accounting software. Or at least, I tried to. Incorrect password. I frowned. I tried again. Same message. Daniel had changed the password, without telling me. That alone wasn't unusual. People update passwords all the time. But then I remembered something. Daniel never handled the accounting. I did. For 12 years, I balanced every invoice, every receipt, every payroll report. Bookkeeping wasn't just something I helped with. It was my responsibility. So why would he suddenly lock me out? On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying one memory. About a year earlier, I'd asked him why he stopped asking me to review the monthly accounts. He smiled and said, "You've done enough." I hired someone. I hadn't questioned it. After all, Emma was preparing for college. Teaching had become more demanding. Part of me had even been relieved. Now, I wondered whether that conversation had never been about helping me at all. Maybe it had been about quietly removing me before I noticed something. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Hello?" A man's voice replied. "Mrs. Carter? My name is Marcus Reed. I worked with your husband for almost 9 years. I said nothing. He continued. "I know this call is inappropriate, but after hearing what's happening, I think we need to talk." My heart began to race. "What do you mean? What's happening?" There was a long silence. Then Marcus said quietly, "I don't think Daniel ever expected you to start asking questions." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Who is this?" "My name is Marcus Reed. I worked with Daniel for almost 9 years. His voice sounded calm, not nervous, not rushed, like someone who had rehearsed this conversation 100 times. "I don't think we should discuss this over the phone. I'd like to meet you." I hesitated. "I don't even know you." "I know. And after today, I don't expect you to trust anyone." There was a brief silence. Then he quietly added, "But I think you deserve the truth." For the next hour, I drove around Raleigh without any destination. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, delete the number, go home, pretend life was still normal. The other part, the part that kept replaying those signatures in my head, needed answers. At exactly 5 o'clock, I walked into a small coffee shop near downtown. Marcus was already there. He stood as I approached. He looked to be in his mid-40s, well-dressed, tired eyes, the kind of face that had spent too many years under stress. "I'm glad you came." "I almost didn't." "I know. Neither of us ordered coffee." Marcus slid a sealed envelope across the table. "I've carried this for almost 2 years. I looked at it but didn't touch it." "What's inside?" "Copies." "Copies of what?" "Emails." My heartbeat quickened. Between Daniel and me, I stared at him. If this is some kind of revenge, it isn't. I left Carter Horizon last year, not because of money, because I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I slowly opened the envelope. The first email was dated nearly 4 years earlier. It wasn't personal. It wasn't emotional. It was business. Daniel had written, "Remove Naomi from future financial approvals. She doesn't need to be involved anymore." My stomach tightened. Another email. "Transfer bookkeeping access to the new accounting team." Another. "Change all online banking credentials after Friday." I looked up. "I remember that Friday." Marcus nodded. "Of course you do. That was the week Daniel told everyone he hired an outside accountant." I closed the folder. "So he planned all of this?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked me something unexpected. "Has Daniel ever raised his voice at you?" I frowned. "No." "Ever hit you?" "No." "Ever threatened you?" "No." Marcus leaned back. "That's what made this so difficult." "What do you mean?" "People think manipulation always looks cruel. It doesn't. Sometimes it looks like kindness." He looked out the window before continuing. "Daniel always spoke about you. He loved you. He was proud of you. He never cheated. He never joked about leaving you. He honestly believed he was doing the right thing." I stared at him in disbelief. "The right thing? He took my home. He erased my name. He lied to me for 5 years." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. I'm not defending him. I'm telling you, he never thought of it as stealing." My frustration boiled over. "Then what did he think he was doing?" Marcus looked down at his hands. "Protecting you." The words hit me like ice water. I almost laughed. "Protecting me? By making me legally own nothing?" He nodded. "That's what he believed." I stood up. "This conversation is over." Marcus didn't stop me. He simply reached into his briefcase one last time. "There is one thing you should see." I turned back reluctantly. He placed a thick financial report on the table. Across the front, printed in bold black letters, were the words, "Confidential." Below it, another line, "Carter Horizon Development." I opened the first page. My eyes scanned the numbers. Loans, credit lines, construction financing, millions of dollars. Far more than I knew Daniel had ever borrowed. The final page carried one sentence highlighted in yellow. Estimated business liability, $12,480,000. I looked at Marcus. 12 million? He nodded. "Daniel's company isn't growing. It's drowning. I felt every thought inside my head collide at once. If Daniel was drowning in debt, why buy a new truck last year? Why remodel the kitchen? Why smile every morning? Why tell me everything was fine? Marcus answered before I even asked. Because if investors believed he was struggling, they would have walked away. And if you knew, you would have made him stop, I whispered. So he lied to everyone. Marcus looked directly into my eyes. No, he lied to one person. You. I left the coffee shop carrying the report. For the first time, I wasn't asking myself whether Daniel had betrayed me. I was asking something far more dangerous. How much of our marriage had been real, and how much had been carefully managed? As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Running late tonight. Don't wait up. I stared at the screen. Then, for the very first time in 18 years, I didn't answer my husband's message. I didn't reply to Daniel's message. For 18 years, that had never happened. If he texted, I answered. If he called, I picked up. If he asked, I trusted. Tonight, I simply placed my phone face down on the passenger seat and drove home. The house was quiet. Emma was upstairs studying for her SAT exams. Murphy greeted me with his usual excitement. Nothing inside those walls had changed, except me. I walked into our bedroom, opened Daniel's closet, and stood there, doing something I never imagined I'd do, searching through my husband's belongings. For a long moment, I felt ashamed. Then I remembered the quitclaim deed. The shame disappeared. His closet was immaculate. Dress shirts arranged by color, ties rolled neatly inside wooden drawers. Even his shoes looked organized. Daniel always believed, if your life is organized, your mind will be too. I used to admire that. Now, it made me wonder what else he'd carefully organized. The top drawer held nothing unusual. Watches, receipts, business cards. The second drawer, old tax folders, insurance papers. Nothing suspicious. Then I reached the locked bottom drawer. I frowned. In 18 years, I'd never noticed it had a lock. I searched for a key. Nothing. Then I remembered something. Daniel always carried the same leather key holder. One silver key had no label. I'd asked about it years ago. He smiled. Office storage. I'd never questioned it again. Just then, I heard Emma walking down the hallway. I quickly closed the drawer. A second later, she knocked softly. Mom? You, okay? I smiled. Come in. She stepped inside holding 2 mugs of tea. I figured you could use one. I accepted the mug. Thank you. She sat beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly asked, Is something going on with you and Dad? My heart skipped. What makes you say that? She shrugged. You've both been acting strange. Dad barely looked at you this morning, and you didn't kiss him goodbye. I forced another smile. We're just stressed. She nodded. But I could tell. She didn't believe me. After Emma went back upstairs, I walked into Daniel's home office. Unlike the bedroom, this room wasn't tidy. Blueprints covered the desk. Property maps hung on the walls. Coffee cups sat beside stacks of paperwork. For years, I'd avoided touching anything in here. It was his workspace. Tonight, I opened every drawer. Halfway through the desk, I found something unexpected. A small black notebook. No title. No company logo. Just plain leather. Inside weren't business notes. There were dates, addresses, property numbers. Each page listed one house. Beside every address, Daniel had written short notes. Sold. Pending. Delayed. Then, one page stopped me cold. Our address. 1842 Willow Creek Drive. Beside it, only 4 handwritten words. Transfer completed. She signed. I stared at the sentence. Over. And over. She signed. Not, we refinanced. Not, documents complete. Just, she signed. My hands began trembling. I flipped to the next page. Another note. Written only 3 weeks later. Next phase begins after audit. Audit? What audit? I kept turning pages. Most of the entries made no sense, until I reached the very last page. There, folded inside the notebook, was a business card. The name printed across the front read, Grant Hollow Financial Recovery Specialists. On the back, someone had handwritten a meeting time. Monday, 9 a.m. tomorrow. The next morning, I didn't go to school. Instead, I parked across the street from the office listed on the card. At exactly 8:57, Daniel's truck pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out, straightened his tie, and walked inside. 5 minutes later, another black SUV arrived. A woman in a navy business suit stepped out carrying a briefcase. She greeted Daniel with a handshake. Not a hug. Not a smile. Business. Pure business. I waited. 45 minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, they emerged together. The woman handed Daniel a thick envelope. He didn't open it. He simply nodded, shook her hand, and walked back to his truck. But before he got in, he did something that made my stomach tighten. He looked around, slowly, carefully, as if making sure no one had followed him. I ducked lower in my seat. My heart pounded so hard. I thought he might hear it through the windshield. He climbed into his truck and drove away. I waited another minute, then crossed the street. Inside the office, the receptionist smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I took a slow breath. "Yes, I believe my husband had a meeting here this morning. I'm Naomi Carter." The receptionist typed something into her computer, then frowned. "I'm sorry. Our client records are confidential. I understand. I just need to know one thing. What kind of company is this?" The receptionist hesitated, then answered. "We specialize in corporate insolvency." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She looked at me sympathetically. "We help businesses that are close to bankruptcy." The word hit me like a punch. Bankruptcy. Daniel wasn't expanding. He wasn't growing. He was trying to save a company that was collapsing beneath him. But one question still refused to leave my mind. If he truly wanted to protect me, then why had he written, "She signed"? As if I were nothing more than another task, crossed off a checklist. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes. Bankruptcy. The word refused to leave my head. Daniel had never mentioned it. Not once. Not when we remodeled the kitchen. Not when we booked Emma's college tours. Not when he smiled across the dinner table every night, telling us everything was finally falling into place. Everything had been falling apart. I drove to school. Not because I was ready to teach, because I needed something familiar. Children asked questions. Teachers laughed in the hallway. Life continued, as if my entire world hadn't quietly shifted beneath my feet. During lunch, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, thinking about picking up dinner tonight. Anything you want?" I stared at the message. How could someone hiding millions of dollars in debt still ask whether I wanted Thai food or pizza? For the first time, his kindness confused me more than his lies. That evening, Daniel came home carrying my favorite Thai takeout. He smiled the same smile I'd fallen in love with 20 years earlier. "I figured you deserved a night off from cooking." "Thank you." He kissed my forehead, exactly like he always did. Only now, I couldn't stop wondering. Was every loving gesture genuine? Or was he trying to ease the guilt he'd been carrying for years? After dinner, Emma disappeared upstairs. Daniel walked onto the back porch with a cup of coffee. I watched him through the kitchen window. He looked exhausted. His shoulders seemed heavier than I remembered. For a brief second, I almost walked outside, almost asked him everything. Instead, I waited, because once those questions were asked, our marriage would never return to what it had been. The next morning, Olivia Brooks called again. "Mrs. Carter, I've received something you should see." "What is it?" "A copy of the loan file. I think you should come in." An hour later, she placed another thick folder on the conference table. "This wasn't easy to obtain. But because your signatures appear throughout these documents, you're entitled to review them." I opened the file. Construction loans, investment agreements, personal guarantees. Everything looked overwhelming. Then, one page caught my attention. Emergency Asset Protection Plan. I frowned. "What is this?" Olivia adjusted her glasses. "It's a legal strategy, sometimes used when a business faces catastrophic financial exposure." I looked at her. "What does it do?" "It separates certain personal assets from business liabilities." I felt my pulse quicken. "So, that's why Daniel transferred the house." She nodded slowly. "It appears so. But," she paused, "there are better ways to handle these situations. Both spouses are usually involved. Transparency is important. He chose not to involve you." I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I wasn't asking whether Daniel had lied. I knew he had. The question had changed. Why had he believed he couldn't trust me with the truth? Before leaving, Olivia handed me one final document. "This is the last thing in the file." It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a deed. It was a handwritten note, signed by Daniel. addressed to the bank. I frowned. This isn't standard. It isn't. I began reading. If my business fails, I accept full personal responsibility. My wife has dedicated 18 years to supporting my dreams. She had no role in the financial decisions that created these liabilities. I respectfully request that every available legal protection be used to keep her financially secure. The letter ended with one sentence, written entirely by hand. She deserves a future. Even if I lose mine. I lowered the page. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The words were real. The signature was real. The love felt real. So why? Had he hidden everything? As I walked toward the parking lot, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Daniel. It was Marcus. You read the protection letter. How do you know? Because Olivia called me. I frowned. Why would she call you? There was silence. Then Marcus sighed. Because I was the one who convinced Daniel to transfer everything into his own name. I stopped walking. What? I told him it was the only way to save you. You? I thought I was helping. I was wrong. Before I could answer, Marcus whispered something that made my blood run cold. Naomi, there's one thing Daniel never told either of us. What? The bankruptcy was never the biggest threat. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean? Marcus lowered his voice. Not over the phone. No. I've had enough secrets. If you know something, tell me. There was a long silence. Then he finally spoke. It wasn't the debt that scared Daniel. It was the investigation. I frowned. Investigation? The state, the Internal Revenue Service, and 2 commercial fraud investigators. Every word hit harder than the last. I pulled my car over. Daniel committed fraud? I don't know. Marcus answered honestly. And that's the problem. 3 years earlier, one of Carter Horizon's largest investors had accused several construction companies of inflating project costs. Millions of dollars had disappeared. No one knew where the money had gone. Several companies were investigated, including Daniel's. So he was guilty? I never said that, Marcus replied. In fact, the investigators never charged him, but they didn't clear him either. They froze contracts, reviewed financial records, interviewed everyone. For nearly 18 months, I closed my eyes. Daniel had gone through all of that, without telling me. Not once. Marcus continued. If investigators believed company money had been transferred into jointly owned assets, they could try to recover those assets through civil proceedings. I swallowed. So Daniel transferred everything because he thought they'd take the house? Exactly. But he never stole anything. I never saw evidence that he did. So why didn't he explain this? Marcus sighed. Because every lawyer he spoke to gave him the same advice. Say as little as possible. Don't discuss an active investigation. Not even with family. The words made sense. Legally. But emotionally, they made everything worse. That evening, I stood in our kitchen watching Daniel wash the dinner dishes. The warm water ran over his hands. Emma was upstairs finishing homework. Murphy slept beneath the table. It looked like every ordinary night we'd ever shared. Except now. I knew my husband had spent years living inside a nightmare, and he'd never let me in. He looked over his shoulder. You've been quiet lately. I know. You okay? I almost answered. Almost asked everything. Instead, I smiled weakly. Just tired, he nodded. I've been tired too. For just a second, his mask slipped. I saw it. Fear. Real fear. Gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Later that night, after Daniel fell asleep, I quietly opened my laptop. I searched public court records. Case after case appeared. Construction disputes, contract litigation, civil recovery claims. Then, I found it. State of North Carolina. Financial Compliance Review. Carter Horizon Development, LLC. Case status. Closed. I frowned. Closed? I opened the summary. The final decision was only 3 paragraphs long. After an extensive financial review, insufficient evidence exists to pursue civil or criminal action against Carter Horizon Development, LLC. The matter is hereby closed. I read the paragraph again. And again. Daniel had been investigated. For almost 2 years. But he'd never been charged. Never sued. Never convicted. Legally, he had done nothing wrong. Then why? Had he kept living as though disaster was still coming? The answer arrived the next morning. Not from Daniel. Not from Marcus. From Emma. She walked into the kitchen holding an acceptance letter. Mom, I got in. Tears filled my eyes. Stanford? She nodded excitedly. I got in. Daniel hugged her so tightly, I thought he might never let go. I knew you could do it. Emma laughed through happy tears. We have to celebrate. Daniel smiled. Absolutely. Then, while Emma ran upstairs to call her best friend, his smile disappeared. He quietly looked toward the college acceptance letter, then toward the kitchen window, and whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. My heart broke, because for the first time, I realized something. The man standing in my kitchen wasn't pretending everything was fine because he enjoyed lying. He was pretending because he believed carrying every burden alone was what a husband was supposed to do. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten something even more important. Marriage wasn't supposed to be carried by one person alone. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, I stood alone in the kitchen. The acceptance letter still rested on the counter. Stanford University. Emma's dream. Daniel walked in carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He smiled. I figured you couldn't sleep either. I accepted the mug. Thanks. For a long moment, we stood there in silence. The refrigerator hummed quietly. Rain tapped against the windows. Everything felt strangely peaceful, which somehow made what I was about to do even harder. I placed my mug on the counter. Daniel. He looked up. We need to talk. His smile faded instantly. Not because of my words. Because of my voice. He knew. Something had changed. He slowly pulled out a chair. Okay, what about? I looked directly into his eyes. I know about the quitclaim deed. The color drained from his face. He didn't ask, what quitclaim deed? He didn't pretend to be confused. He simply looked down at the floor. I know you transferred the house. I know you removed my name. I know about Carter Horizon. I know about the bankruptcy. I know about the investigation. Every sentence landed like another weight on his shoulders. When I finished, he whispered only one word. How? I've been asking questions. Daniel closed his eyes. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he quietly stood, walked to the sink, rested both hands against the counter. His shoulders trembled, not from anger, from exhaustion. I wanted to tell you. I laughed bitterly. When? After everything was over. When was that supposed to be? When Emma graduated? When we retired? When I buried you? He had no answer. I stepped closer. You let me believe that I owned my own home. You let me help pay every mortgage payment. You let me work overtime. You let me save every dollar. And all that time, I legally owned nothing. Daniel turned toward me. His eyes were filled with tears. I know. No, you don't. My own daughter warned me. He frowned. What? The day you handed me those papers. Emma told me not to sign anything without reading it. I laughed. I trusted you. And you watched me sign away everything. Daniel covered his face. I've hated myself every single day since. The words came out broken, barely audible. I never wanted to take anything from you. I was trying to keep them from taking everything. I shook my head. Then why didn't you tell me? I couldn't. You could. No. My lawyers, my accountant, Marcus, they all told me the same thing. Keep the business separate. Protect the house. Protect Naomi. Don't let her become legally connected. I stared at him. So you decided for me. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. That was exactly what he'd done. I walked into the living room. Daniel followed. Slowly. I didn't need protecting. I needed a husband. I needed a partner. I needed someone who trusted me enough to let me stand beside him. He sat down on the couch. For the first time in our marriage, Daniel Carter looked completely defeated. I was terrified. I know. I thought, if everything collapsed, you'd lose the house. You'd lose your retirement. Emma would lose her college fund. I thought, if I carried everything alone, you'd survive. Tears rolled down my face. You don't understand. I would have chosen that. I would have chosen the debt. I would have chosen the uncertainty. I would have chosen the fear. I would have chosen all of it, as long as we chose it together. Daniel looked at me, completely broken. I didn't know how. You've always been the strong one. I smiled sadly. No, we were supposed to make each other strong. Neither of us spoke. Minutes passed. Only the sound of rain filled the room. Finally, Daniel stood, walked upstairs, returned carrying a thick black binder. He placed it on the coffee table. What's this? Everything. Every loan, every contract, every mistake. I should have shown you 5 years ago. He slowly pushed the binder toward me. If you still want to know the truth, I'm done hiding. I rested my hand on the binder. It felt heavier than paper should. Because inside wasn't just financial history. It was 5 years of silence. 5 years of fear. 5 years of decisions made without me. As I opened the first page, a folded envelope slipped onto the floor. Across the front, written in Daniel's handwriting, were 5 simple words. If I don't come home. My heart stopped. I looked up. Daniel's face turned completely white. He whispered, I prayed. You'd never have to read that. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The envelope lay on the coffee table. Daniel stared at it, like it was something he'd hoped to forget forever. I slowly picked it up. What is this? His voice was barely a whisper. I wrote it 2 years ago. Why? He looked away. Because there was a real chance I wasn't coming home. I frowned. You told me the investigation was over. This wasn't about the investigation. Then what? Daniel took a deep breath. It was about the bank. He sat down across from me. His hands trembled. When Carter Horizon lost its biggest investor, every loan became due. I couldn't repay them. They wanted immediate liquidation. If negotiations failed, I would have lost the company, the house, my retirement, everything. I looked at him. So you thought they'd arrest you? He nodded slowly. My attorney warned me that if negotiations collapsed, there was a possibility I'd be personally sued. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know whether I'd be home or sitting in a courtroom for years. So I wrote that letter. I carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Daniel's. Naomi, if you're reading this, then everything I tried to prevent has already happened. First, I'm sorry. Not because the business failed, because I failed you. I asked you to trust me, while refusing to trust you with the truth. I convinced myself I was protecting you. Now I realize I was protecting myself from watching disappointment in your eyes. The next paragraph made my throat tighten. If I lose everything, promise me one thing. Don't waste your life trying to save mine. Sell whatever you can. Take Emma. Start over. You deserve a future, even if I'm no longer part of it. By the time I reached the last page, my vision had blurred with tears. There isn't another woman. There isn't another family. There isn't another life. There has only ever been you. And that's why hiding this became the biggest mistake of my life. I lowered the letter. The room fell silent. Daniel never tried to defend himself. He never interrupted. He simply waited. Finally, I asked the one question that had haunted me from the very beginning. When you handed me those papers, did you already know what they really were? He closed his eyes. Yes, the honesty hurt more than any lie ever could. So every time I thanked you for taking care of us, you knew? Yes. And every anniversary, every Christmas, every birthday, you looked me in the eyes, knowing I'd signed away my legal rights. Without understanding it, a tear rolled down his cheek. Yes, for a long time, I couldn't speak, because the worst part wasn't losing the house. It wasn't losing ownership. It wasn't even the lies. It was realizing my husband had decided I couldn't be trusted with my own life. The following morning, Emma left early for school. The house felt strangely empty. Daniel was sitting at the dining table, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The untouched coffee in front of him had gone cold. I called Olivia Brooks, I finally said. He looked up. I know. I also called my own attorney. His expression changed. Not anger. Acceptance. I figured you would. I asked her one question. What? Can what you did be reversed? He nodded slowly. It can, but it'll take months. New deeds, new financing, new agreements. I'll sign whatever she prepares. I studied his face carefully. You'd give everything back? Without hesitation. Before the pen touched the paper. I believed him. For the first time in weeks, I believed every single word. Not because trust had returned, because regret can't be faked. Then I quietly said something neither of us expected. I don't want the house. Daniel looked confused. I want something harder. What? I want the truth. From now on, no matter how ugly it is, no more protection, no more secrets, no more decisions made for me. If we're going to survive this, we survive it together. Daniel nodded slowly, then whispered, I don't know if I deserve that chance. I looked at him. Maybe you don't, but Emma deserves parents. Who stop hiding from each other? The following weeks felt nothing like the 18 years before them. There were no dramatic arguments, no broken dishes, no slammed doors. Just silence. The kind of silence that exists when two people love each other, but no longer know how to reach one another. Daniel kept every promise he made that morning. Within days, our attorney prepared new documents, every property transfer, every financial agreement, every ownership record. This time, Daniel didn't hand me a single page to sign. Instead, he sat beside me. Every paragraph, he read aloud. Every legal term, he explained. Whenever I looked confused, he stopped and waited. For the first time in years, I wasn't signing papers. I was making decisions. 3 months later, my name was back on the deed, back on the accounts, back where it had always